The morning my mother-in-law called to tell me she had already signed the papers, I was standing in the parking lot of a Home Depot in Boise, Idaho, holding a bag of mulch I didn't need. My name is Theodore Marsh. I'm 41 years old, and I work as a land surveyor. I've spent the better part of my career walking the edges of other people's property, measuring what belongs to who, marking lines in the dirt that the law says matter. You'd think a man like me would have seen it coming. I didn't. Her name was June. That was my wife's mother. June Alderman, 72 years old, retired schoolteacher, 43 years in the same house on Birchwood Lane in Meridian, Idaho. The house had a covered porch where she grew tomatoes in the summer and a detached garage her late husband had built by hand in 1989. She used to say that garage was the most honest thing Leonard ever made because he built it himself and it never once leaked. Leonard died in 2018, pancreatic cancer, fast. June handled it the way she handled most things, quietly and without asking anyone for help. I respected June. More than I told her, probably. She was the kind of woman who remembered the name of every student she'd ever taught. She kept a box of birthday cards under her bed, one for every person she cared about, ready to go. She never missed a date. When her daughter, my wife of 14 years, Simone, when Simone started pushing for us to move June into assisted living, I didn't say anything. I should have. But I had learned early in my marriage that the space between Simone and her mother was not my space. I kept my survey flags on the outside of that particular property line. I want to be honest about that. This is not a story where I was the hero the whole time. I wasn't. Simone had a brother named Ray. Ray had a wife named Connie, and Connie was a paralegal for a real estate attorney in Nampa. When Simone and Ray first started talking about moving June out of the house and into Sunrise Gardens, which was a very nice place, don't misunderstand me, I'd been there. It had good food and good staff, and June hated the idea of it. When they first started talking about it, Connie started handling the paperwork. That's the part I didn't understand until it was nearly too late. I came home from a job site in late October, a Tuesday. I remember because I'd spent the whole day staking a new subdivision out near Kuna, and my truck smelled like wet grass and surveyor's chalk. Simone was on the phone in the kitchen. I heard her say, "She's fine with it, Ray." She signed the disclosure, and then she heard me come in and turned toward the window. I put my bag down, washed my hands, made coffee, didn't say anything. That's another thing I should have done differently. The next time I saw June was Thanksgiving. She made green bean casserole the same way she'd made it for 30 years, with the fried onions from the can and nothing else. She ate it standing at the counter before everyone arrived, because she always said she couldn't enjoy something she'd cooked if she had to watch other people eat it first. Old habit. I stood there with her and ate mine standing up too. She looked at me for a long time while we ate. "Theodore," she said. She always called me Theodore. Never Theo, never Ted. "Do you know what escrow means?" I looked at her. "Yes," I said. "Good," she said. And then Ray's family arrived and that was the end of it. I thought about that conversation for 2 weeks. I'm not sure why I didn't do anything with it. Maybe I told myself I was staying out of it. Maybe I was afraid of what Simone would say. Maybe I had convinced myself that if June had really wanted my help, she would have asked for it more directly. People can tell themselves a lot of things when the alternative is uncomfortable. What finally moved me was not a conversation or a confrontation. It was a photograph. I was looking for a receipt on Simone's laptop. With her permission, this was a shared machine we kept in the kitchen, and I saw a PDF she hadn't closed. It was the cover page of a quitclaim deed. June's address on Birchwood Lane. The date on it was 3 weeks prior. The grantee listed was not June. It was a name I didn't recognize. Alderman Family Holdings, LLC. I closed the laptop. I stood there for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and called the Ada County Assessor's office, because that's what a land surveyor does when he sees something that doesn't add up. You go to the record. The woman I spoke to was named Patricia, and she was very helpful. She confirmed that a transfer had been recorded on October 29th. The property at 2417 Birchwood Lane, Meridian, Idaho, previously owned solely by June Alderman, was now titled to Alderman Family Holdings, LLC. I asked who the registered agent was. She told me. It was Connie. I sat in my truck in our driveway for 40 minutes. I called a real estate attorney I knew from a job in 2019, a man named Bernard who I'd helped survey a commercial property dispute in Garden City. I described what I'd found. I didn't name anyone yet. I just described the structure. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Theodore, the issue with a quitclaim deed is that it transfers whatever interest the grantor has, no guarantees. If she signed it, it's going to be very hard to argue. she didn't know what she was signing. The question is whether she had independent counsel. Did anyone explain to her, separately, not the family's attorney, did anyone explain to her what she was giving up? I said I didn't know. He said, find out. I went to see June the next morning. I told Simone I was going to check on a gutter she'd mentioned was pulling away from the fascia, which was true. The gutter was pulling away from the fascia. I just had other reasons for going. June was in the backyard when I got there. She was wrapping her rose bushes for winter, which she did every November, the same blue foam tubes she'd bought at the hardware store in 2004 and used every year since. Theodore, she said. The gutter on the west side, I said. I'll look at it. I know why you're here, she said. She kept working on the rose bush. You saw something. I came around the fence and crouched down next to her. June, did anyone sit down with you and explain what a quitclaim deed does? She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I thought maybe I'd read this wrong. Maybe she did understand. Maybe she had agreed to this, really agreed, and I was just an anxious man who measured too many property lines for a living. Then she said, Ray told me it was for taxes. That it would protect the house from the estate when the time came. Did a lawyer explain that to you? A lawyer you chose. She looked at her hands. Connie explained it. Connie is a paralegal for Ray's attorney, I said. She's not your attorney. She has no obligation to represent your interests. June set down the foam tube. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has taught 7th grade for 4 decades and knows exactly when someone is about to tell her something she was hoping she wouldn't have to hear. She did say I should have my own lawyer look at it, June said quietly. I didn't. I didn't want to make things difficult. I sat down on the cold ground next to her, right there in the November grass. June, the house is in an LLC now. If you move into Sunrise Gardens, they can sell it without your permission, or refinance against it, or transfer it again. She didn't say anything. Did you know that? No, she said. I didn't know that. I called Bernard from the driveway before I left. He gave me 2 names, elder law attorneys who handled this kind of situation. I wrote them both down and went back to the front door and gave them to June on a slip of paper. You don't have to use either of these, I said, but call one of them before you do anything else. Before you sign anything, before you agree to anything, before you even take their phone calls. Okay? She folded the slip of paper and put it in the pocket of her gardening apron. You fixed the gutter, she said. I fixed the gutter, I said. What happened next was not fast. Elder law is not a fast process, and I want to be honest about that too. There was no single moment where the whole thing collapsed in front of everyone. Real life doesn't work the way it does in movies. But here's what I know. June called one of the attorneys on that slip of paper, a woman named Harriet, who had an office in downtown Boise, 2 blocks from the Capitol building. Harriet determined that June had not received independent legal counsel before signing the quitclaim deed. She also determined that there may have been what's called undue influence, a legal term that means someone in a position of trust used that trust to guide a decision in their own favor rather than in the grantor's. That's a very careful way of saying something I'm going to say more plainly. Ray and Connie convinced June she was protecting herself, when actually she was handing them the house. The process to address this took about 7 months. There were letters between attorneys. There were some very uncomfortable family dinners that I will not fully describe except to say that Simone did not speak to me for 3 of those weeks, and that I understood why, and that I believed I had still done the right thing. I should tell you about one specific evening, though, because I think about it often. It was a Sunday in early April. June had asked me to help her go through some boxes in Leonard's workshop, the garage he'd built by hand, the one that never leaked. She was looking for the original deed to the property, which Harriet needed for the legal process. The boxes were what you'd expect from a man who'd spent 40 years in the same house. Old tax returns, warranties for appliances that had been thrown out a decade ago. A manual for a drill that Leonard had given to a neighbor in 2011. In the 3rd box, underneath a stack of old Popular Mechanics magazines, I found a manila envelope. It was sealed with the kind of metal clasp that bends over, and it had one word written on the outside in Leonard's handwriting. I recognized the handwriting from the birthday cards June kept under her bed. She'd shown me one once, years ago, a Valentine's card from the 1990s, just 2 sentences and his name. The word on the envelope was, June. I handed it to her without opening it. She looked at it for a long time. Then she sat down on the metal folding stool Leonard had kept next to his workbench and she opened it. Inside was a document from 2009. It was a revocable living trust prepared by an attorney in Boise, a firm I actually recognized from my work. They handled a lot of property in the Treasure Valley. The trust named June as the sole trustee and sole beneficiary during her lifetime. The successor trustee was not Ray. It wasn't Simone either. It was a family friend named Walter who had passed away in 2015. But there was a section for alternate successor trustees, and Leonard had filled that in too. A cousin of June's, a woman named Bertie who lived in Eugene, Oregon, who June hadn't spoken to in years, but who, when June called her the following week, answered on the second ring and cried for the first 5 minutes. The living trust meant that any transfer of the property during June's lifetime required her action as trustee. It also meant that the quitclaim deed Ray and Connie had prepared, and June had signed, potentially conflicted with the trust terms. Harriet called it a significant development. Bernard, when I told him, was quiet for a moment and then said, "Good thing you surveyed that garage." I didn't say anything clever. I was thinking about Leonard, about a man who built a garage by hand and never once mentioned that he'd spent $800 on an attorney in 2009 to make sure his wife would be okay. About the kind of quiet that isn't absence, the kind that's preparation. The resolution legally was a settlement. I won't give you the details because some of them are not mine to share. What I will tell you is that June is still on Birchwood Lane. The property was retitled in her name alone, no LLC, and Harriet put a note in the public record that made it substantially harder for anyone to attempt the same thing again. June has a new estate plan now, one she sat down with Harriet and went through line by line. She knows what every word of it means. Ray and Connie don't come to Thanksgiving anymore. Simone and I went through 6 months of counseling. She said at one point that she felt I had chosen her mother over her. I sat with that for a while before I responded, because I wanted to tell her the truth and I wanted it to land the way I meant it. I told her I had chosen the right thing over the easy thing, and I had done it for June, but I had also done it for her. Because the woman she would become if she let this happen to her mother was not the woman I married, and I wasn't willing to watch that happen without saying something. That's the closest we've come to a real fight in 14 years of marriage. I think it was also the closest we've come to a real conversation. Last summer, June drove up to our place in her old Subaru. She still drives, doesn't want to hear otherwise, and she brought 3 things: a pie, a tomato plant, and an envelope she handed to me at the door before she even came inside. I opened it. It was a birthday card, one of the ones she kept in the box under her bed. It wasn't my birthday. It was a Tuesday in July and my birthday is in March. Inside she had written 4 sentences. I'm not going to share all of them because some things are private, but the last one I will share, because I think it's the truest thing anyone has said to me in a long time. She wrote, "You walked the line when no one asked you to." I stood there in my doorway holding a birthday card that wasn't for my birthday, from a woman who had spent 40 years teaching other people's children how to be decent. And I thought about her late husband in his garage in 2009, quietly drawing a line around her that no one even knew was there. That's what a good boundary looks like. You don't always see it until you need it.